Hello, everyone. Thank you to those that are joining us live or watching the recording for being with us today. My name is Karen Kwasi, and I am joined by my colleague, Catherine Johnson. We are representing the Educating All Learners Alliance content team. If you are unfamiliar with the Educating All Learners Alliance, or EALA as we often call it, we are an uncommon coalition of organizations established in early 2020 as a result of COVID-19. With remote learning becoming the norm, we realized that there would be a gap in services provided for students with disabilities. Since then, we've gone on to establish an extensive resource library, produce podcasts and webinars like this, and many other resources to support educators as they support their students. We adapt our resources to support current times and address issues that educators may currently be experiencing. A few months ago, we started a series where we share the top resources from the previous month within our resource library, and then we give theme resource recommendations that you can use for the following month. You can find the entire series as well as several other resources on our YouTube page called Educating All Learners. Since we are now in February, we will be providing you with our top resources from January, and this month's theme is readjusting to remote learning. So we'll provide recommendations to help educators have an easier transition back to remote or hybrid learning. I will now pass it over to Catherine to get started on our resources.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'll go ahead and start with those top resources from January 2022. Our top two were from recently published resources. So we're so glad to see that they were some of our top viewed for the last month. The first one we're going to showcase is called How Schools Can Meet the Moment with Programs to Teach the Whole Child. And this was a new resource guide from one of our founding partners, Brooklyn Lab Charter School, which is an XQ school, which is also one of our partners. And in this resource guide, they provide a lot of great insight into how to ensure that ESSER funds can be used long-term to support whole child education policies. This resource guide in particular gives educators a lot of really great insight into ensuring that one-term funding projects like ARP funds aren't just short-term solutions, but can actually enact long-lasting change in whole child teaching and learning that focuses on learner variability, cultural identity, and ability. And our next resource from January 2022 was from another one of our founding partners, Digital Promise. And they released a resource guide called Learner Variability Project in the Field, a guide for culturally responsive practice. And the purpose of this guide was really to provide educators and educator teams with questions and protocols to guide and reflect on how to apply culturally responsive instruction practices as they address learner variability. As we know, learner variability is a recognition that all students differ and that learning sciences and research guides us in understanding how these differences matter for learning. So this is a really great guide that embraces both students' struggles and strengths and considers the whole child: academic, social, emotional, and student background. Our next top resource from January 2022 was an interesting one. It's actually a quick resource, quick read. It was just 5 tips to make your events, meetings, and webinars accessible for attendees with disabilities. And these 5 quick tips really just go over all of the transcription and other accessibility features that different ed tech platforms have to make sure that your events, meetings, and webinars are accessible for attendees with disabilities, and really works to ensure that we can create an inclusive and community for everyone. Our last top resource from January 2022 was actually the 42nd Annual Report to Congress on the implementation of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, from 2020. So this was quite a surprise to us as one of our top resources from January. And it was last year's 42nd Annual Report to Congress on the implementation of IDEA. Often released around this time, educators may be reading last year's report in anticipation of the 2021 report, which should be released soon. So feel free, if you would like to review it as well. The 2020 report describes our nation's progress in providing a free, appropriate public education for children with disabilities under IDEA, ensuring that the rights of these children with disabilities and their parents are protected, assisting states and localities in providing IDEA services to all children with disabilities, assessing the effectiveness of efforts to provide IDEA services to children with disabilities. So that rounded up our top resources from January. The topic that we chose for this month to cover was best practices for transitioning to remote learning. And this was really because we saw a high search for these kind of resources in January. So we wanted to feature some of the best ones we have in our resource library as the nation's still grappling with Omicron and a lot of changes in terms of kids quarantining and switching back and forth to virtual and in-person learning. So we hope you find these resources useful as well in the month ahead. So our first resource is called Co-Teaching Virtually, a model to support all learners. This was a case study from two 8th grade teachers at Rockport Middle School in Massachusetts. And in it, they discuss the success that they have found in co-teaching in a distance learning setting during the pandemic. They really highlight a lot of collaboration strategies to create an accessible and mutually supportive teaching model for math instruction in particular that engages all learners in their classroom. The next resource we want to highlight is called Removing Barriers to Effective Distance Learning by Applying the High Leverage Practices, Tips and Tools. So this is a great resource from some of our partner organizations, the Cedar Center in particular, and in collaboration with the National Center for Systematic Improvement. As they say, distance learning does offer a unique opportunity to individualize and personalize instruction and establish inclusive learning environments for a range of diverse learners. So applying high leverage practices to lesson design and delivery, both in person and virtually, can empower educators to provide the enabling conditions that ensure diverse learners are provided with equitable access to high quality instruction. Then we have growth mindset and mindfulness at a distance. This is from Juliana Herbertree, the 2021 National Teacher of the Year, and she leads an inclusive class designed to help students manage the emotions of daily life in school, which is particularly important now, as we all know. During distance learning, she helps students find helpful strategies to center themselves when they're feeling big emotions. And she proposes using this time to continue to build community and relationships so that students feel safe when they most need their teacher's support. That's a great one to check out too. Next is another case study called Prioritizing Community and Belonging in Distance Learning, the Oakland Reaches Citywide Virtual Hub. And this case study describes the Oakland Reaches Citywide Virtual Hub, which is a distance learning program launched exclusively during COVID-19. The chief program officer there, Michael D'Souza, illustrates the potency of shifting power to families and prioritizing a sense of belonging and cultural identity while gaining political traction at City Hall. It was a really good read, a good resource to understand individualized approaches that have been transformative for the learners and their families at Oakland Reaches, including those with disabilities. And our next resource for transitioning to virtual learning is another case study called Virtual Writing Lesson for an Inclusive Classroom. This is often one of our top resources month after month. It's not surprising. It describes distance learning with an inclusive classroom for writing, specifically at the 2nd grade level, but the strategies and the approaches can really be used in most of middle elementary. And it describes a reflection of the universal design for learning approach to inclusive education design. And it was designed to explicitly build student knowledge, skills, and engagement in navigating the new virtual classroom. In the case study, they use Book Creator, which is asynchronous explicit technical support, and Google Forms for peer feedback. All right, and then our last resource for transitioning to virtual learning is called Transforming the Parent-Child Relationship in Remote Learning. So this is a case study that's really focused on engaging with families and continuing that relationship through virtual learning. It's from Brittany Moser, an autism spectrum disorder coach at the neighborhood charter schools. She shares resources aimed at partnering families and schools during COVID-19. In the case studies specifically, she shares how her resource, Tips and Tricks for Remote Learning, became a foundational launchpad for supporting families and educating their children remotely. And she also includes a really great list of activities and resources that families can use to ensure continuity for their children when transitioning to remote learning. And I think that does it for our resource roundup for January 2022. I'll pass it back to Karen now to go over our next steps and close us out.
So we just want to take the time and thank everyone for tuning in to our monthly webinar. You can find all information, including our resources that we talked about today, our website, educatingalllearners.org, and that will give you all the information that you need and access to our resource library. Thank you.